Long ago in the south of Italy and on the island of Crete, people were buried holding directions, not maps, instructions. A sheet of gold hammered thinner than a fingernail, small enough to fold twice and set into the palm of a dead hand, or laid on the mouth, or hung at the throat. On it, scratched in tiny letters, was what to do when you arrived. We have found them, dozens of them. They are in museums now under low glass, curled slightly, the writing so small the scribes must have worked with the leaf pressed to a board and their eyes very close. And they all say roughly the same thing. You will come to a place where two waters run. Do not drink from the first one. Everyone drinks from the first one. Walk past it. Further on, there is a second spring, colder, with white stone around it and guardians who will ask you who you are. And then the tablet tells you the answer. The exact words, like a password given to a traveler before a border. That is what they were afraid of. Not fire. Not judgment, mostly. They were afraid of forgetting. Tonight, we are going down there, slowly and safely, and you may fall asleep anywhere along the road. Before we start, one small thing, gently. If these long nights help you rest, a like helps this quiet channel find other people who cannot sleep. And I would love to know where you are. Leave a comment with your town and the hour showing on your clock right now. I read them in the mornings. It is a strange comfort to see how many of us are awake in the dark at slightly different times all over the world. Now let your body get heavy. Nothing is going to frighten you here. This is not that kind of place, whatever you have been told. Come and stand at the mouth of a cave. It is late afternoon. The land above is dry. There is thyme underfoot and cracked limestone and the ordinary chirr of insects in the heat. Behind you, downhill, someone's goats. This is not the edge of the world. This is farmland. That is the first thing to understand. The Greeks did not put the land of the dead in the sky or in some other dimension. They put it down. Directly down, under the floor of the world you are standing on, and the ways in were real places you could visit on a Tuesday. There were many mouths. A gorge in the northwest where a black river runs into a marsh. A lake in Italy with steep wooded sides where the water gives off a smell and birds will not fly across it. A cave on a headland in the deep south of the mainland. A crack in the rock near Eleusis. A hollow near Corinth. Local people knew which cave was theirs. They brought offerings to it. Feel the air at the entrance. It changes about a step and a half in. Above your ankles, it is still the warm, dry afternoon. Below, it is cold, and it moves. A slow draft coming out, steady as breathing, the way a deep cave always breathes. The smell riding on it is clay. Wet clay and cold stone and, very faintly, iron. The mineral taste that comes off a spring running through rock. Your hands know it before your mind does. The hair on your forearms lifts. Somebody has been here recently. There is a shallow pit dug just inside the entrance, cut square about a forearm across, and the earth from it heaped to one side. There is a smell of honey, poured into the ground and gone sticky, with ants at the edges. A little milk soaked into the clay. Barley scattered. A cup upside down. That was the method. You dug a pit and poured into it, downward, because the powers you were speaking to were downward. Everything about the ritual was inverted. If you sacrificed to the sky gods, you burned the offering, so the smoke rose and you looked up. If you sacrificed to the dead, you poured it into the earth and looked at your feet. Honey first, then milk, then wine, then water, then barley meal over the top. Different regions kept different orders, and archaeologists arguing over cup fragments have made careers of the differences, but the shape is always the same. You feed the ground. You do it at night or at dusk. And you speak quietly, because down there the hearing is very good. Step in. The floor slopes. It is smoother than you expect, worn by water and by feet. 20 steps and the daylight behind you is a shape, not a light. 40 and it is a coin. 60 and you stop turning around to check. There is a torch. Somebody left it, or you brought it, and it does not matter which. Pine, split, and soaked in resin, and when it catches, it burns with a sound like a small animal moving in dry leaves. The light it gives is orange and unsteady, and reaches perhaps 3 body lengths. The walls here are wet, not dripping, just wet, with a skin of water moving so slowly over the stone that you would have to watch a long while to see it move at all. Down. The path folds back on itself twice. In the second bend, there are bats, but they are asleep, and they stay asleep, and their smell is warm and papery and not unpleasant, and then that is behind you too. And then the ceiling goes away. You can tell before you can see it. The sound of your own feet stops coming back to you. The torch, which has been throwing your shadow big on the wall, suddenly has nothing to throw it on, and the shadow goes out into the dark and does not land. You are in a space large enough to hold a city. You cannot see the roof. You cannot see the far side. What you can see is the ground ahead of you, sloping away, gray, and something like a plain, and much further off, a very faint horizon line of paler gray, where there ought to be no horizon at all. There is no wind. That is what your body notices first and cannot get used to. Air, but no wind. Not even the small movements a room has. The torch flame stands straight up and does not lean. Down here, they said, there is no weather. Nothing arrives. Nothing changes season. The whole enormous country holds one long, unmoving hour and has held it since before there were people to be afraid of it. The path continues, and now there are others on it. You do not see them arrive. You simply become aware, the way you become aware of someone in a doorway, that you are not walking alone. They are not frightening. Hold on to that. They are quiet, and they are shaped like people, and they are gray the way things are gray in low light, rather than the way ash is gray. And if you look directly at one, you find your eye slides slightly, as though you were trying to focus on something at the very edge of your vision, even though it is right in front of you. An old woman, a boy of about 9, a man in the clothes of a farmer, with his hands still marked from the work. They walk without hurry. They do not talk. Nobody looks back. The old word for them was skiai. Shadows, also idola, images, likenesses, the same word you would use for a portrait, or a reflection, or a statue. That is what a dead person was thought to be, not a soul in the way we might mean it. A likeness, the shape a person leaves behind, walking down a slope, keeping its outline and losing everything else. And what it loses, first and worst, is memory. That is the thing the gold leaves were written for. Down here, a shade forgets its own name. It forgets its children. It thins out into a general sadness with no particular contents. The Greeks did not fear punishment nearly as much as they feared that, becoming a nobody in general, a gray outline in a crowd of outlines, no longer able to say who you had been. The boy walking ahead of you is barefoot. His feet make no sound at all on the stones. Someone brought him down here. That is worth knowing before we go further, because nobody makes this walk unaccompanied. There is a God whose job this is, and he is the friendliest figure in the whole system. You know him already from other stories. The quick one, the messenger, the patron of travelers and traders and thieves and anyone else who moves about at night. He wears a traveler's hat with a broad brim against the sun and boots for walking, and he carries a staff with 2 snakes worked around it. And one of his titles is the Guide of Souls. He is the one who comes at the end, not to punish, not to judge, not to take, to collect, and to walk you down the way an usher walks a stranger to a seat. In the pictures painted on the sides of jars, he's often shown doing something almost domestic, standing at a graveside with the staff held out, gathering small winged figures who are the dead, herding them gently the way you would move geese. The oldest poem has an image of him leading a whole crowd of them down at once, and the sound they make going is the twittering of bats disturbed on a cave roof. And he goes ahead along the damp ways and past the streams and past a white rock and past the gates of the sun and the country of dreams, and brings them out into the meadow of asphodel. Past the country of dreams. That is the road. Nobody in that world was surprised by the neighborhood, because the other 2 who work this route are brothers, and they are twins, and the first of them is sleep. The second is death, not the lord of this place, but the small quiet god of the moment itself, and the 2 of them are shown together constantly, 2 winged men, one dark and one pale, lifting a body between them. There is a scene where they do exactly that. In the middle of a battle, a young prince has fallen, far from the country he was born in, and his father, who happens to be the greatest of the gods, is not permitted to save him, because fate is fate, even for that family. So the father does the only thing left. He sends the twins, and they come down through the noise and lift him and carry him out of the dust and the shouting, and take him home across the sky to his own land, where his people will wash him and bury him and raise a mound with a stone on it, and where he will have his name said over him properly. Sleep and death, carrying a boy home. That is how the Greeks pictured the softest possible ending, and I think it says more about them than any of the monsters. And what happens up above in the meantime is a long, careful piece of work by women. The body is washed. That was theirs to do. The women of the household, the older ones first. Warm water, and then olive oil worked into the skin, and clean cloth, and the jaw bound up with a strip of linen, and the coin. Then the laying out on a low bed, feet toward the door, with wild marjoram and celery leaf scattered around, and a vessel of water standing outside the house, so that anyone who has been inside can wash before rejoining the ordinary world. Then a day and a night of it. Neighbors come. The women stand around the bed with one hand raised to the head, and they sing, not weeping exactly, singing the formal lament, verses and answering verses, taking turns, and it goes on for hours. In some villages in Greece, the women were still doing very nearly the same thing within living memory, in the same shape, with some of the same lines. And then, before dawn on the 3rd day, the procession. Deliberately before dawn, so as not to trouble the daylight or the neighbors, out of the city, because the dead were kept outside the walls, along the road with the flute in front. Then the fire or the grave, then the mound. Then, and this is the part that mattered most, the visits. On the 3rd day, the 9th, the 30th, and every year after, with more of the honey and the milk and the barley poured into the ground, because a shade that is remembered up there does better down here. That was the belief, plainly held. The offerings were food, and being spoken about was food, and a family that stopped coming was a family that let someone starve. They also thought that a shade with no grave and no rites could not settle, and that such a one might come back, not as a monster, but as a bad night, a heaviness, a dream that keeps returning. There were specialists you could hire to make it stop. There were days in the calendar when the dead were understood to come up and walk about the city, and on those mornings, people chewed buckthorn and smeared pitch on the doorposts, and did not conduct any important business. And in the evening, they said out loud at the door, "Go now, that is enough. The festival is over." They were not frightened of them exactly. They talked to them the way you talk to relatives who have stayed too long. The boy ahead of you had all of this done for him. You can tell because he is walking and not standing back at the edge of the water with the others. And now, somewhere in front, at the bottom of the long slope, you begin to hear water. It is not a pleasant sound. It is not unpleasant either. It is simply enormous and low, and it comes from everywhere, the way traffic comes from everywhere in a city at night. There are 5 rivers down here. You will not see them all, and neither did anybody else. The first is Acheron. That is the one you have to cross. The name was understood to mean something like the River of Woe, though the argument over that goes back a very long way, and nobody has settled it. It is wide, wider than any river you have stood beside. The water is black, and it is black because there is nothing above it to reflect. The second is Cocytus, the River of Wailing, which the old poets said was a branch running off the first. The third is Phlegethon, which burns, a river of fire running through rock, which some later writers put down in the deepest part, where we are not going to linger tonight. The fourth is Styx, the river of hating, the oldest and strangest of them, whose water the gods swear their unbreakable oaths on. If a god swears by Styx and lies, they lie without breath for a year. And the fifth is Lethe. We will come back to Lethe. That is the whole of tonight's business in the end. The bank of Acheron is shelving mud, cold and finer than sand, and it takes a footprint perfectly and holds it. There are thousands of footprints. Some of them are very old. There are poplars here. White poplars, growing right down to the waterline. And this is worth a moment, because the tree keeps coming back in this country. The leaf is dark green on top and white and furred underneath, and when it turns, it flickers between the two. Above ground, you always know a poplar by that flicker in the wind. Here, there is no wind, and the leaves hang still, showing you their dark side, and they never turn. Willows too, they said, and black poplars and beds of reeds. And no birds in any of it. That is what tells you where you are more than anything else. All that water, all those reeds, and nothing calls. And there is a crowd. This is the largest gathering you will see anywhere on the journey, and it is at the water's edge, and it is not moving. They stand in the shallows and along the mud. Some of them sit. Some have been sitting so long that the posture has become the whole of them. They are the ones who cannot cross. Here is the rule, and it is the reason a great deal of ancient life looked the way it did. To cross, your body up above must have been buried properly, with the rites said over it. If you drowned at sea and were never found, if you were left on a battlefield, if you died alone somewhere and nobody came, you wait. The old number given was 100 years. 100 years on this bank, and then you may go. This is why families searched for bodies. It is why an enemy's corpse, being denied burial, was the worst thing one people could do to another. It is why, in the story of a girl who buried her brother against a king's order and was walled up alive for it, everyone listening knew she was right and the king was wrong, and knew it instantly without needing it explained. Even a handful of dust would do, thrown 3 times over the body, with the name said. That was enough. That was the whole requirement. 3 handfuls of dirt, and a person you had never met could cross. There is a young man standing near you at the edge. He does not want anything from you, but he speaks, and his voice comes at a normal volume from further away than it should. He tells you he fell from a roof. He had been drinking. He went up to sleep in the cool air on the flat roof of a house where he was staying, and he woke in the night, confused and forgot the ladder, and stepped off the edge and broke his neck. And his friends left in a hurry the next morning and did not notice he was missing. He is not angry about it. He asks you only to remember him and to see that a mound is raised and an oar planted on it. because he was a sailor, and that is what is done. Some of you will know his name. He is in the oldest of the poems, and he is the very first shade that a certain traveler meets when he calls the dead up out of a pit. And this small, unimportant, embarrassing death, this man who fell off a roof because he was drunk, was given more careful attention by the poet than half the heroes. That was deliberate. What it meant to the people listening was, it does not matter how you died. It matters that someone says the words over you. Out on the black water, something is coming. You hear the oar before you see the boat. One oar, worked slowly from the stern, and the sound it makes is a single knock and then a long draw. The boat is old, not picturesque old, badly old, patched, low in the water, with the seams showing where they have been recaulked a dozen times and never well. Water stands in the bottom of it, and the ferryman is exactly as unpleasant as everyone always said, and not at all as terrifying. He is a squalid old man. That is the word the poets kept, over and over, in Greek and later in Latin. Filthy, unkempt, with a wild gray beard and eyes that seem to have a red light in them, and a rough cloak knotted at his shoulder with dirt worked into the cloth. He is enormously strong. He is also, quite clearly, extremely tired of his job. He does not greet anybody. He shouts at people to get in. He shoves the ones who are slow. He turns others back with the pole, hard, and does not explain why. And he wants paying. You have heard about the coin? It is true, and we can be precise about it. From about the 5th century before our era, there are graves all over the Greek world with a small coin in the mouth of the dead, an obol, sometimes two, low-value bronze or silver, placed on the tongue or between the teeth. Not payment for the whole journey. The fare for one crossing. The price, roughly, of a cheap thing at market. Archaeologists have found them in perhaps a quarter of the graves they have looked at, which tells you something honest about belief. Some families did it, some did not. Some could not spare the coin, and the ones who did it because it cost almost nothing, and why take the risk? Feel it if you like. There is a coin in your mouth. Cold, small, tasting of metal, tucked under your tongue where it has been since somebody who loved you put it there and closed your jaw. You take it out, you give it to him. He does not look at it. Get in. The boat sits low, and it groans when you step down into it, and the water in the bottom comes over your feet and is very cold. There is no bench worth the name. You hold the gunwale. Beside you, an old woman holds it too, and her hands are the only part of her that seems entirely solid. He pushes off with the pole. There is a lurch, and the mud lets go of the keel with a sucking sound, and then you're on the black water. It is a long crossing, and it is unexpectedly restful. There is nothing to see. The bank behind goes. The bank ahead has not arrived. The oar knocks and draws, and the boat rocks a little on each stroke, and the cold comes up off the water onto your face, and the poplar smell fades and is replaced by nothing at all. Nobody speaks. The old ferryman breathes through his nose. Somewhere out in the dark, there is a sound that might be another boat. Let your head tip forward if it wants to. There was one living man who talked his way onto this boat with nothing but a song, and one who came down with a sword and simply took what he wanted, and one who came for a dog and was let past out of sheer astonishment. We will meet all three before the night is out. But first, the boat touches, and on the other side, something very large stands up in the dark and shakes itself. The dog is the size of an ox. He is also, and this is the part that nobody prepares you for, delighted to see everyone. He comes down the shingle at a trot with his head low and his tail going, and the tail is heavy enough to knock a person over, and he pushes his muzzle into the crowd of new arrivals and snuffles at them one by one with a great warm gusting breath that smells of an animal that has been eating. 3 heads in most tellings. 50 in the oldest one, which nobody could ever picture properly, so it settled at 3. A mane of small snakes along the neck, which move lazily, like grass underwater. A serpent for a tail. And a coat that is short and coarse and hot to the touch. He is not there to keep you out. Everyone gets that backwards. He is there to keep you in. Coming down, he fawns on you. He greets you the way a farm dog greets a cart arriving. It is only if you turn around, if a shade tries to walk back up the shingle toward the water, that you find out what he is. And then he is very quick, and it is over immediately, and nobody ever tries twice. That was the arrangement the old people understood. Death is not guarded like a prison from the outside. It is a country with a friendly border and no exit. There is a way past him for the living, and it is comically simple. You bring cake, a flat honey cake with barley in it, the kind that was made for temples, thrown so that all 3 heads go for it at once. Down in the south of Italy, they buried people with those cakes in the grave. Actual clay models of them, cheaper than the real thing, but the idea was the same. Something for the dog. Some of the tablets even remind the dead to keep their cake handy. You will not need one. Nothing here wants to stop you tonight. Put your hand out and let him push his broad hot head under it as you go past, and feel the snakes in the mane move under your palm like fingers, and then leave him behind because there is a gate. The gate is bronze, and it is very old. It stands in a wall that goes off into the dark in both directions, and the wall is limestone block, cyclopean, the huge unmortared kind that later Greeks assumed had been built by giants because no ordinary man could lift the stones. There are green streaks down the bronze. There is no lock. The gate stands open. It has stood open so long that the ground has grown up around the foot of it. Beyond it, the country opens out and the light changes. You have been walking in torchlight. Now the torch has stopped mattering and you can see for a long way, and there is no source for it. A gray, even glow, like the light 40 minutes before sunrise on a cloudy morning, coming from no particular direction and casting nothing. And directly in front of you, the road divides. This is the crossroads, and it is one of the oldest images in the whole tradition. 3 ways. One goes left, one goes right, one runs on straight ahead, and in the fork between them sit the judges. 3 of them, on a stone bench, worn into a curve by very long use. They are not gods. This is important. They were kings once, mortal men, chosen for this work after their own deaths, because they had been famous in life for being fair. One of them was a lawgiver on Crete, whose rules people still quoted centuries later. One was his brother. One came from another line entirely, and he is the one who is said to hold the keys. Nobody down here is tortured for having the wrong beliefs. There is no test of faith. What the judges care about is much narrower and much older. Did you keep your oaths? Did you honor your parents? Did you treat a guest properly? Did you commit murder within your own family? Did you steal what belonged to a god? Later, as the mystery cults grew, that broadened. It began to matter whether you had been initiated, whether you had made yourself pure. Philosophers argued about the whole apparatus. One of them wrote out a careful account of the judgment, and then admitted in the same breath that nobody sensible would insist on the details, only that something like it must be true. The verdicts are given quietly. There is no announcement. Each shade steps up, stands a moment, and is directed by a small movement of the hand. Most of them go straight on. That is the plain truth of it, and it may be the least famous fact about the Greek underworld. For the overwhelming majority, nothing happens. No reward, no punishment. Straight on, into the gray country. Very few go to the left, down the road that slopes, and where the light gets redder. We will look at that road later. from a safe distance, and I will keep it gentle. And very few go right and up, but some do. Let us follow them for a moment before we go the ordinary way, because you should not sleep tonight thinking this place has nothing good in it. The right-hand road climbs. That is the first surprise. Climbing down here, the stone underfoot goes from gray to something warmer. There is a smell before there is a sight, and the smell is green, crushed grass and wet earth in the sun, and blossom of some kind. And then there is light. Real light. Not the gray. The old poets could not agree where this place was. Some put it at the far western edge of the world above, out past the ocean stream, islands where the wind blows soft and the ground gives 3 harvests a year. Later writers moved it down here and made it a region of the underworld itself. One tradition said the sun shone there at the same hours it shone above, so that the dead and the living kept the same day. The word we use for it now came into Greek from somewhere else, and the philologists cannot agree what it originally meant. Perhaps a place struck by lightning, perhaps something older than Greek entirely. What is in it is simple. Meadows, trees with fruit, people wrestling and running and playing dice on the grass, horses grazing loose with their harness left in the field, music, actual music, a stringed instrument being played nearby and badly by someone practicing. There are hedges of laurel and a river running over stones with a noise you have not heard since the world above. The people here remember themselves. That is the whole of the reward. They know their names, they know their children. They can hold a conversation and finish it. They lie in the grass in the afternoon and get up again. And a few tellings offered something more, and it is the loveliest idea in the entire system, that if you lived well 3 times over, 3 separate lives, each time coming back, and each time choosing rightly, then you were allowed to leave. Out along the road, at the end of that country, to the islands of the blessed, where the ocean breeze comes off the water, and there is no coming back at all. Not because you are trapped, but because there is nothing left to return for. Stand at the edge of that meadow a moment, with the warm air on your face. Listen to the badly played instrument, then turn around, because most of us are not going that way tonight, and the road we are on runs straight on into the gray. That country has a name, and the name is a flower. Asphodel grows on poor ground. You may have seen it without knowing. It comes up all over the Mediterranean in spring, on land too thin and too stony for anything else. A tall, pale stalk, waist high, with small 6-petaled flowers of a white that has gray in it, faintly pink at the veins. Goats will not eat it. It grows thickest where the soil has been exhausted and abandoned. The country in front of you is nothing but that, in every direction, to the limit of what you can see. Walk into it. The stems come to your hip. They do not rustle. They should. A field of dry stalks should hiss when you push through it. But they part around you in silence and close behind you, and after 10 paces, you have left no trace of having come this way. There is a scent, very faint, slightly sweet, and slightly bitter, like the water in a vase of flowers on the second day. The dead are everywhere in it, not crowded. Spread out, in 1s and 2s and small groups, standing in the flowers, and some of them are walking slowly to no destination, and some are not walking at all. The old woman from the boat is out there somewhere. The boy is over to the left, and he has stopped, and he is looking at his own hands. This is where almost everyone ends up. Not punished, not rewarded, simply here in the pale field, under no sky, in air that does not move. And here is the condition that the Greeks were so frightened of, and I want to describe it carefully, because it is the hinge of the whole night. A shade in the asphodel cannot remember. It is not that the memories are taken away in one stroke. It is more like a slow drain. The name goes late. The small things go first. What your mother's kitchen smelled like. the word for the tool you used every day for 40 years, the face of the person you would have said in life that you could never forget. They thin. They go pale the way cloth goes pale in the sun, and the shade goes on standing in the flowers, still shaped like a person, holding less and less. They cannot speak, in the oldest account, until they are given something. They come toward the living, the way moths come toward a lamp, and they gather, and they make a sound that the poet described as a thin twittering, like bats deep in a cave when one of them is disturbed and they all come off the rock at once, squeaking. And to give them speech, you must give them blood. That is what the pit was for at the beginning of this journey. When a certain traveler came here at the edge of the world with 2 sheep, 1 black ram and 1 black ewe, and dug a trench a 4-arm square and cut their throats over it so the dark blood ran down into the ground, that was not cruelty, and it was not sorcery in the way we would mean it. It was warmth. It was a loan of the one thing the dead no longer have. Drink, and for a little while you are a person again, and can say your own name and know who is standing in front of you. He had to hold them off with his sword. That is the detail that stays with people. They came up out of the dark in hundreds, brides and young men and old men worn out with work, and girls with grief still new on them, and soldiers still in dented armor. And he had to keep them back from the trench with a drawn blade so that the one shade he had come to consult could drink first. And while he stood there guarding it, his mother came out of the crowd. He had not known she was dead. He had left her alive. She stood at the edge of the pit and did not know him. She had not drunk yet. She looked at her own son, and there was nothing in her face at all, and he had to stand there with the sword out and let her wait her turn while he did his business with the prophet, because those were the rules, and he had come a very long way. Afterwards, she drank, and she knew him, and they talked. She told him what he had missed, that his father slept in the ashes by the fire in winter, and out among the fallen leaves of the vineyard in summer, wearing rags, an old man refusing comfort, that his wife was holding on, that his son was growing. And then she told him how she died, and she said it plainly. No illness took her. She died of missing him. He tried 3 times to put his arms around her, 3 times. That is the number the poem gives, and the poem gives it slowly. He stepped forward and reached and closed his arms, and there was nothing in them. She went through his hands like a shadow, like a dream. And he asked her, with his voice going, whether she was some phantom sent to torment him. And she explained gently that this is simply what the dead are. The tendons no longer hold the flesh to the bone. The fire takes all that. What is left is the likeness, and the likeness flits away like a dream. 3 times. And the 3rd time, he stopped. That gesture was so exactly right that later poets stole it whole. It turns up again in Latin, 400 years on, twice. A son reaching for his father in this same country, 3 times. And 3 times the image slipping through his hands like a light wind, and most like a dream. Some scholars think that repetition was a formula the singers reached for, a stock line for a stock moment. Others think it survived because everyone who ever heard it recognized it from their own sleep. Both can be true. Let yourself rest here a moment. You are in a field of pale flowers, in still air, and nothing hurts. There are famous people in this field, and it is worth walking a little way among them, because their situation says everything about how the Greeks felt about all this. Over there is the greatest fighter who ever lived. He chose this. He had the choice explicitly offered to him before he sailed for a war. A long, ordinary life at home, and no one remembering his name, or a short life and glory that would last forever. He took the glory. Every child in that world learned the story. And when he was asked, down here, whether he was consoled by all that fame, whether being Lord among the dead made up for it, he said no, He said he would rather be a hired man, working the land for another man, a landless man with nothing of his own, than be king over all the perished dead. That line went through the Greek world like a crack through glass. It is the most quoted thing anyone says in the underworld, because it comes from the one man whose entire identity was built on the trade, and he says, flatly, to the first living person he has met in years, "I got it wrong." He asks after his son. That is all he wants, news that the boy turned out well. And when he hears that the boy is brave and respected, he goes off through the flowers with long strides, pleased, and that is the last we see of him. And a little further on stands a very big man who will not speak. He had been the second best fighter of that war, and after the best one died, there was an argument about who should be given his armor, and it was decided by a vote, and he lost. And in the shame of losing, he did something terrible in the night, and then fell on his own sword. He is standing off in the asphodel apart from everyone. He has drunk. He can speak. He knows perfectly well who has come to see him. And when he is called by name and apologized to, really apologized to at length, by the man who won the vote, he says nothing at all. He turns and walks away into the dark among the other shades. The poet does not tell us what he was thinking. He simply lets him go and lets the silence sit there. And 3,000 years later, it is still the loudest thing in the chapter. Some grudges outlast the body. That is the only comment offered. Now, ahead of you, a long way off across the flowers, there is a red light on the underside of the dark. We are not going down there. We are going to stand on a ridge and look, the way you look at a storm on the far side of a valley. That is Tartarus, and it is not simply a worse part of the same place. It is another country under this one. The measurement the oldest poem gives you is a strange, memorable, entirely useless one. It is as far below the land of the dead as the land of the dead is below the sky. And they gave you a way to feel it. An anvil of bronze, dropped from heaven, would fall for 9 days and nights and land on the earth on the 10th. Dropped from the earth, it would fall 9 more and reach the bottom on the 10th. It was a prison before it was a punishment. The first things put down there were not people at all. They were the elder gods, the generation before the one everybody knows, thrown down after the Great War and shut behind a bronze door with a bronze threshold and a wall of bronze running around the whole of it 3 times over. Mortals came later, and there are only a handful of them, and everyone is famous. You can see the nearest from here. A hill and a man and a stone. The stone is not decorative. It is a boulder the size of a small cart, and it does not fit his arms, and the strain in his back is real. He gets it most of the way. There is a point near the top where the slope eases, and you think every single time that this run will be the one. And then it goes. It comes back down past him with that heavy, uncatchable rolling of a big stone on rough ground, and he stands there a moment with his hands on his knees, and then he walks down after it. He was a king, and a very clever one, and what he did was cheat death twice. He chained up the god who came to fetch him, actually chained him, so that for a while, nobody in the world could die at all, and battles became absurd, men hacking at each other and getting up again. And when that was sorted out, he had one more trick left. He told his wife before he went not to give him a proper burial. Then he arrived down here and complained bitterly that his funeral had been neglected, and asked permission to go up and put it right, and was allowed, and did not come back. They had to fetch him. So the punishment fits precisely, an eternity of nearly finishing. Beyond him, in a pool, there is a man standing in water up to his chin. He is thirsty. Every time he bends his face to drink, the water drains away and leaves black mud around his feet. Over his head, there are branches loaded with pears, pomegranates, apples, sweet figs, olives. When he reaches, the wind lifts them away toward the dark clouds. He was a king too, and a favorite of the gods, invited to eat at their table, which no mortal had ever been, and he abused it. Different tellings give different crimes. He stole the food of the gods and passed it around to his friends to show off. He repeated what he had heard at the table, and in the worst version, he tested them with something monstrous served at a banquet in his own hall. Whichever it was, the punishment is exact. He sits forever in the middle of a feast that will not let him eat. We took a word from him. When something desirable is held just out of reach, we say we are being tantalized, and the man is standing right there. Further off, there is a wheel turning in the air, always turning, with a figure bound to it, and the wheel is on fire in the later versions, and merely turning in the older ones. He was the first man to murder a kinsman, and then, forgiven for it and brought up to heaven out of pure mercy, he tried to lay hands on the queen of the gods. She was replaced with a shape made of cloud in the dark. The cloud bore him children, and he was put on the wheel, which does not stop, and which was said to be the reason the year turns. And in a wide bare place there are women with water jars, 49 of them. They fill the jars at a cistern and carry them to a great vessel and pour them in, and the vessel is pierced all over its bottom, and the water runs out as fast as it goes in, and they walk back for more. There were 50 sisters, made to marry 50 cousins against their will. 49 obeyed their father on the wedding night and did what he told them to do. One did not. She loved her husband, or pitied him, and let him live, and she is not here. To the initiated, that image meant something quite specific. Some of the mystery cults taught that the uninitiated soul was exactly this: a leaking jar, carrying and holding nothing, forever. A philosopher used it in an argument about desire and never bothered to explain the reference because he did not have to. That is enough of that country. Notice that the light down there does not reach us, and that the sound does not either. Notice as well who is not in Tartarus. No ordinary sinners, no liars, no cheats, no unkind neighbors. 5 or 6 mythological figures who insulted the gods personally, and a defeated generation of deities, and nobody else. The Greeks did not, on the whole, believe most people were going to be tortured after death. They believed most people were going to be forgotten, which they found worse. Turn away, the road goes on. And now, quite suddenly, there is architecture. The palace has been there for some time, and you only see it when the ground rises. It has no lights in it. It is black stone, and it is very large and very plain. No painted friezes, no bright columns, none of the color the Greeks put on everything they built above ground. Just mass and doorways, and the pale gleam of asphodel growing right up to the threshold. The two who live here are less frightening than their house. He is not the devil. There is no devil in this system, and it is worth saying plainly because 2,000 years of borrowed imagery have made it hard to see. He is one of 3 brothers who drew lots after a war. One got the sky, one got the sea, and he drew this. He did not want it, and he did not refuse it. He runs it correctly, and he almost never leaves. He is called the host of many, and the receiver, and Lord of the dead, and above all, he is called by a name that means the wealthy one, because everything that grows comes up out of the ground, and every metal comes out of it, and so the God of what is underneath is also the God of the harvest, and the silver and the grain. Farmers prayed to him. That startles people now. Many would not say his name at all, in case saying it drew attention. They used the polite substitute instead, and the polite substitute is what we still call him. And beside him is a young woman who spends half the year here and half above, whose mother is the corn, and whose story we have told on other nights. She is not a prisoner in this room. She is a queen with real authority. In more than one myth, she is the one who decides, and the one who can be softened, and the one who says yes when he would have said nothing at all. She is the reason anything in this chapter ever ends well. Because now we come to the ones who came down here alive. There are 4 worth knowing. 1 came for a dog, 1 came for a friend and made an appalling mistake. 1 came for a box, sent by a jealous goddess who expected her to die on the way. And 1 came with nothing but a stringed instrument and the intention of arguing. The one who came for the dog came in daylight, so to speak, and walked out the same way. And the whole episode has the quality of a very strong man being handed an impossible errand and simply doing it. It was the last of 12 labors, and it was designed to be the one he could not survive. Go down. Bring up the hound. He was let in because of who his father was, and because he had been initiated in the mysteries first, which mattered. He had gone to Eleusis and been taught whatever it was they taught there, and the story is careful to mention it. Down here, the shades scattered from him in every direction, which is one of the few genuinely funny images in the tradition. Hundreds of dead heroes bolting into the flowers at the sight of a large man with a club. He asked permission. That is the part people forget. He asked, and permission was given, on one condition: take him without weapons. So he did it with his arms. He got hold of the animal around the necks and held on while the tail serpent bit him, and the mane worked at his hands, and he held on until it stopped fighting. And then he carried it up into the daylight, where it saw the sun for the only time in its existence, and was so frightened that it slobbered. And where the slobber fell, they said, a poisonous plant came up. Then he took it back. He had promised. While he was down there, he did 2 other things worth carrying with you. He met a shade who begged him for help, and he was so moved that he threatened to fight a god over it. And he found 2 men sitting on a stone bench, and he pulled one of them free. Those 2 are the second story, and it is the strangest. 2 friends, both grown men, both kings, made a pact to help each other marry daughters of the sky god. The first went and took a girl, very young, and it went badly, and she was recovered by her brothers. Then it was the other's turn, and the other had chosen the queen of the underworld. They came down here to steal her. 2 mortals, walking into that black palace to carry off the wife of the Lord of the Dead. And he received them politely. That is what makes it awful. He was courteous. He invited them to sit and rest after their journey, and gestured to a bench of stone. They sat down, and the stone took them. Their flesh grew to it. In some tellings, coils of snake bound them. In others, the rock simply closed. And what the stone did to them, over time, is the thing that has been humming under this entire night. They forgot. They forgot why they had come. They forgot each other's names, and their own, and the whole plan, and sat there in the dark with their hands on their knees, at ease, comfortable, with nothing in their heads at all. That bench had a name, the chair of forgetfulness. Later, the strong man came through and found them and got a grip on the first one and tore him off the rock by main force, and they say he left part of him behind on the stone. Which is why an Athenian would tell you with a straight face, Athenians have such thin thighs. He reached for the second, and the ground shook, and he let go, and that one is still sitting there. He was the one whose idea it had been. Some told it more mercifully, and had both released. Athens preferred the version where their own king got out. The third of them came down on an errand, and had been given exact instructions, which she followed. She carried 2 barley cakes soaked in honey and wine, 1 for each direction past the dog, and 2 coins in her mouth, 1 for each crossing, and she was told above all to refuse any food offered to her below and to sit on the ground rather than accept a chair. She got in and out perfectly. She managed the dog, the ferryman, the queen, all of it. And on the way back up, in the sunlight, having been told not to, she opened the box. What was in it was sleep. Not death. Sleep, the sleep of the underworld, and it came out and settled on her, and she went down on the path like a corpse, and lay there until somebody came and swept it back into the box with the tip of a feather and woke her. I have always liked that detail. The one thing the dead have that the living are not allowed to bring back is rest. And now the fourth, and the one everybody knows, and I am going to tell it slowly because it is the end of our road tonight. He was a musician, the best there had ever been, which in that world was not a small thing. His playing stopped rivers, moved trees off the hillside, made stones roll downhill to hear better. Animals lay down around him. He had sailed with the great expedition and outsung the sirens on the way past. His wife died on their wedding day, or shortly after, of a snake bite in long grass by a river. So he came here, not with an army and not with permission. He walked in through one of the caves with his instrument under his arm and played his way down. The ferryman took him for nothing. That is in almost every version. The old man who shoves and shouts and takes coins from the mouths of the dead heard him coming and put out the pole and brought him across the water and would not be paid. The dog lay down. The stone stopped on the hill and the man leaned on it and listened. The wheel stopped turning. The water in the pool came up to the thirsty man's lips, and he did not notice because he was listening. The women set down their jars in the middle of the empty field and stood still. And in that black plain palace, he stood in front of the two of them and played and said the only argument he had, that he had come for one person, that she had been taken early, that if it was refused, he would not go back up, and that all of us come to you in the end anyway. You get everything, eventually, and you can afford to lend. They say the bloodless shades wept. They say it was the only time the queen refused her husband nothing, and the only time in the history of the world that the Lord of the Dead gave something back. The condition you already know. She would follow him up the long, dark road. He was not to look at her until both of them stood in the light. Walk it with him. The path is steep, and the light is gray, and there is no sound behind him at all. None, because she is a shade, and shades make no sound on stone. And this is the cruelty in the arrangement that the storytellers understood perfectly. He has nothing to go on, not a footfall, not a breath, only the promise of a God who has never done this before. Up through the gate, past where the dog is lying with his heads on his paws, along the mud bank, across the black water, up into the throat of the cave where the air begins to change, and he can see the daylight ahead of him now, a shape rather than a light, then a coin of white. He is close, he is very close, and he turns around. Ovid, telling it 400 years later in Latin, says it was fear, anxious that she was not there, and greedy to see her. Virgil, a little earlier, says a sudden madness took him, forgivable if the dead knew how to forgive. Others said it was love plainly, and the simple impossibility of walking that far in silence away from someone you had just been given back. She was there. She was right behind him. He saw her for a moment in the half-light of the cave mouth, and she slipped backward like smoke and reached out for him with hands that could not hold anything, and said one word. And in the Latin, it is only goodbye, said quietly, and she is not angry. He went back to the water and sat on the bank for 7 days and would not eat, and the old ferryman would not take him a second time. That is the story people remember, and it is usually told as a tragedy about impatience. But look at what it is really about, because everything down here has been about the same thing. He was not asked to be brave. He was not asked to fight anything or solve anything. He was asked to trust a memory, to walk in the dark for hours, believing in something he could not see or hear or check, on nothing but the word he had been given. And with the daylight actually in sight, he could not. Come back down with me one last time, not far. There is a place we walked past on the way in, and it is where the gold leaves were pointing all along. It is off the main road, in a hollow, and you would miss it if you were not told. There is a tree, a white cypress, tall, pale-barked, the only thing growing there, and it stands beside a spring of water running out of the rock into a shallow basin. There is a track worn to it from the road, wide and deep, because everybody goes. The water is cold and completely still where it pools. There is a sound of it moving over stone, and the sound is the most inviting thing you have heard since you came down here, and there is a queue. They come off the road in a slow, steady file, and they kneel and they drink, and then they stand up and walk away with their faces smooth and go out into the field of pale flowers. That is Lethe. The word means forgetting. It is the same root the Greeks used in their word for truth, which is one of those facts that philosophers have been chewing on for 150 years. Their word for what is true literally means the unforgotten, the thing not covered over. You are thirsty. Of course you are. You have been walking for hours. But the gold leaf says, walk past it. So, walk past it and keep going, further into the hollow where the track is faint, because so few feet have gone this way, and the ground gets stonier. And after a while there is a second spring. It is smaller. It comes out of the rock in a cleft. There is no tree, and there is no pool to speak of, just water running clean over pale stone, and it is so cold that the air above it feels different on your face. And there are guardians. The tablets say so, and they say they are watching, and that they will speak to you before you can drink. They ask what you are looking for in the darkness of dying death, and they ask who you are and where you come from. Here is the answer, and it is written on leaf after leaf, in slightly different hands, in graves hundreds of miles apart. I am a child of earth and of starry heaven, but my race is of heaven. This you know yourselves. I am parched with thirst, and I am dying. Give me quickly the cold water that flows from the lake of memory. And the tablets promise that they will give it to you, and that afterwards you will rule among the other heroes. Take a moment with that, because it is a real thing that real people were buried holding, and it is one of the tenderest artifacts to come out of the ancient world. It is a cheat sheet. Somebody's family, at the worst hour of their lives, folded a script into a dead hand so that their person would not be caught out at the border. Say this: do not drink there, drink here. Remember that you are not only earth. Remember that you are also the other thing. What the mystery religions were selling, in the end, was memory. Not paradise exactly, and not escape from death, which nobody was offering. Just this, that you would still be someone afterwards, that you would arrive knowing your own name and be able to say it. Some scholars read the whole business as a small elite cult, a handful of initiates in a few cities with an unusual private hope. Others see it as the visible edge of something much broader that most people believed in some vague form and never wrote down. The tablets themselves cannot settle it. They are too short and too personal. They read like notes, not doctrine. Drink if you like. Cup your hands. The water is so cold, it makes your teeth ache and your hands go numb at the wrists, and it tastes of stone. And now, in the version told by a philosopher who wanted to end his greatest book with a story rather than an argument, something else happens. He described a soldier left for dead on a battlefield who woke on his funeral pyre 12 days later and reported what he had seen. Souls judged and sent up or down, and returning after 1,000 years, and gathering in a meadow, and then choosing. That was the part he cared about. They choose their next life. All the lives are laid out, animals and men, kings and craftsmen, famous ones and obscure ones, and the souls come forward in an order decided by lot and pick, and they choose badly, almost all of them. Someone who had lived a comfortable, orderly life without ever thinking hard about it, grabs the life of a tyrant, sees only the power in it, and does not read down to where the rest of it is written. A man who had been the greatest of all warriors, sick of glory, chooses the life of an ordinary private person and looks a long time to find one. The trickster we followed on a different night went last, and by then, the only thing left over was the life of an ordinary man who minds his own business, and he said he would have chosen it first if he had had first pick. Then they walk out across a waterless plain in terrible heat and camp in the evening beside the river of forgetting, and every soul is required to drink a measure of it, and the ones without sense drink more than the measure. And in the night there is thunder, and they are carried up like shooting stars to be born. Whether he believed it, he never quite says. He tells it as a story, and then says that if we are persuaded by it, we will hold to the upward road and do justice with intelligence, and that we will fare well. And that is the last line of the book. Now let us go up. Turn around. The way back is the way you came, and nothing follows you, and the dog only lifts one head and puts it down again. Across the black water, the old ferryman does not speak to you and does not ask for anything, because you are not his business tonight. Up the mudbank, past the poplars with their leaves showing the dark side, past the crowd waiting at the edge who watch you go with no resentment at all. Up the long slope in the gray light. Then the torch again, and the walls closing in, and the bats still asleep, and the sound of your own feet coming back to you from a low ceiling, which, after all that space, is oddly comforting. And then the air changes. You feel it before anything else. Warmth on your face, and moisture, and the first faint smell of time crushed by somebody's goats. The draft is going the other way now. The cave is breathing in. The daylight is a coin, and then a shape, and then it is too bright to look at directly, and you come out with your hand up over your eyes. It is evening. It has been evening for some time. The sun is low and orange over the dry hills, and the insects have started up their evening noise, and everything is the wrong way round. You went into a cave in the afternoon, and the world has gone on for hours without you. The pit at the entrance has dried. The honey has gone dark and crusted at the edges. Ants are still working at it, patiently, the way they were when you arrived. Sit down on the warm limestone with your back against the rock. Down there, none of it is happening. That is the strange piece of the place. The flowers are not moving because there is no wind to move them. The stone is at the bottom of the hill, and the man is walking down after it, and he will start again, and it does not disturb anybody. The queue at the Pale Spring goes on at exactly the same speed it has always gone. Nothing arrives, and nothing changes, and nothing is required of anyone. It is only up here that anything needs doing. And what those people wanted, more than any reward, was so small that it is easy to miss, to keep hold of themselves, to be able to say, at the border, I am a child of earth and of starry heaven, and my name is this, and these were my people. You do not need a gold leaf tonight. There is nothing to remember and nothing to get right. Let the light go. It goes quickly here at this latitude. The orange goes off the hills, and the rock behind your shoulders gives its heat back slowly into the dark, and one star comes out over the sea, and then a second, and then there are more of them than anyone has ever counted. The cave breathes in beside you, cool and steady, the way it will go on breathing for another 3,000 years. Let your own breath fall into that rhythm, in and out, slower than you would have chosen. No hurry now. You are not going anywhere tonight, and neither is anyone else. Sleep well.